You have popping, banging, clunking noises from the front of your Nissan 350Z or Infiniti G35. What I'm going to talk about in this video is actually going to apply to a lot of vehicles that have the same type of suspension. So if the front end of your vehicle is making noises, keep listening. These vehicles have what is called a compression rod. That is this arm right here. This arm attaches from the chassis about underneath, about right here, about the door line or right behind the door line, and goes to the front knuckle. Now, particularly if a vehicle is lowered, especially for you stance guys, you're gonna put a lot of pressure on this particular bushing. This bushing breaks down in the middle right here, and then you start having lots of movement, not only up and down, but forward and back. So if you notice, if you get a lot of clunking, banging, popping noises when your vehicle is either just starting to accelerate, starting to decelerate, so when you push on the brakes, or when you're turning, that is most likely gonna be your culprit. So, for sure if you have a 350Z or G35, but if you have a car that has compression rod type suspension, which again, is this, connects from the chassis up to the knuckle, I'm gonna show you how to replace that today and fix all those noises. Check this out. First thing you're gonna do is get the vehicle jacked up and pull your front wheel off because you're gonna need space to work right here. Second thing you want to do on these vehicles is pull off the subframe support brace, which goes from right here all the way across to the other side of the vehicle. Now, this bolt right there, nut rather, is what is actually holding that compression rod on. So you're gonna have to take that brace off. There's two 14s on the outside, there's a 14 on the inside, a 19, two 14s in the middle, and then obviously it's the same on the other side. Once you have the support brace off, you're going to follow the arm up to where this bolt is. Now, I have an angle kit on this car, but for most of you, unless you have an angle kit, especially the same one, you're gonna have a castellated nut and a cotter pin on this bolt right here. Remove that. Now, I didn't even have to use a hammer to beat either one of these out. They actually came out very, very easy. But something I want you to see here, and you may not be able to see it as, yeah, you can, as well on camera, but see how close this bushing is to the edge of the arm here, and then see how this one's nice and centered. Now, I'm not saying that's gonna stay that way, and I'm also gonna talk to you about another upgrade that you can do here, which I'm going to do with the OEM arms. These are aftermarket arms. They actually look like they're reconditioned arms because they're painted. I'll put a link for these in my bio. They're super cheap though. They come with a new ball joint, the hardware and stuff. But two important things I wanna talk about here is make sure that this cone goes back on the new arm. I've seen people reinstall these, take these out, and then reinstall these without this cone. Not only does it destroy this ball joint, but then you have a ton more noises. So make sure that goes back on. That's number one. The second thing is, like I said, you're gonna wanna inspect these bushings. You know, obviously you're replacing it, so you're like, okay, this should fix the issue, but you wanna know what's going on. You know, for me personally, I'm sure a lot of you, if you're watching this, you wanna know why your vehicle's doing what you're doing. So if I look at this, the bushing, yes, it's ripped, but it's not completely destroyed. I put a extension in there and it did move around a bit, but what I'm thinking is happening is that this extra angle is creating some space, and as the suspension shifts around, what I'm hearing with this pop or this bang, if you will, is just this right? Because the shaft comes down out of the chassis. What I'm thinking is happening is this is shifting just so slightly, and we're hearing the pop of the shaft inside this bushing just moving just a little bit. It's binding a little bit and then popping into place as the chassis geometry shifts a little bit depending on what direction the car is going. And so I would imagine a lot of you are experiencing the exact same thing. Now this one doesn't have, let's see. Yeah, see how not centered that is? If you notice, it's much closer to the top here. And like I said, this may end up happening with this one, but we're gonna see if it quiets it down. Quick, before I install these again and tell you guys what my plan is here, actually, I'll tell you what the plan is here before I install them. So the plan is here is to take these aftermarket ones. They came from Amazon. It's 99 bucks for two of them. Like I said, I'll leave the link below. What I'm going to do is get these cleaned up. And there are a few companies, GK Tech, Z1, those sorts of things, that make a hardened bearing type bushing for this. It's they call it a high misalignment bushing. Let me show you. I actually have these high misalignment bushings on my lower control arms. Cut the video off. So the lower control arms right here actually have the GK Tech high misalignment bushings. And the reason I did that, when I first got under here and I started pulling around on things, I was taking videos of the car, trying to figure out where all these sounds in the suspension came from. Now, when I got this car, I got it for a great price. The shell is very, very clean, but this car's been off the road a few times. And whoever's done some work on this car before didn't really take too much time, care, and attention to do the work properly. So there's a lot of stripped out stuff. There's a lot of hardware missing. So I've been going through, replacing hardware, getting everything back to a quality state. And one of the things I did was instantly replace this, because I came down here and I grabbed this and it was literally moving an inch to inch, side to side. And if you can see that, that is a high misalignment, and you can see it's actually misaligned right now. That's a high misalignment metal bearing. So you're not going to get any sound from that. You're going to get a lot stiffer suspension, a lot stiffer steering response, not necessarily suspension, but steering response, instead of having some slop. Now I still have some slop, and I think it's coming from these torsion arms, or compression arms rather. And so that's why I'm replacing something that I'm sure a lot of you do as well, but I've made common practice, especially the last few years working, a lot of our tuner cars or cars that we're into. Damn, I keep getting grease all over my face. A lot of cars that we're into are getting older. And so we're gonna find that the hardware in these cars is starting to get, rusty, 10 different hands have been on them, working on them, those sorts of things. And a couple of things that I do is I run taps through almost everything. I'll run like these studs that are on the chassis here. The last time I had this off, I did a motor swap in this car. The last time I had these studs off, or that brace off, I ran a die over those studs because one of them was kind of shitty. And then what I like to do is I will take I just set it down somewhere, a Brillo pad, or whatever you want to call these things right here, right? And anytime I can, I will go over, especially because these rods sit over that stud, or these bushings rather, sit over that rod, that stud. You don't want any binding, particularly if you are doing the job because you're trying to quiet down the suspension. So what I like to do is hit the threads with some anti-seize. So clean them up first, hit the threads with some anti-seize, and then just get some cheap grease. Like I use this stuff. So this STP grease, I will put that on the part where the shaft sits in here, right? Where that rod sits in there, I will put some grease on there so there is no binding, for two reasons. Number one, the whole reason I'm doing this job is to make the damn front end of this thing quieter, because it's so loud right now. It pops and bangs and stuff all the time. I look like I got punched in the eye. But the second reason I put the grease on there, and also the anti-seize, is because I want to get a proper torque. So I'm one of those guys. I torque everything as well, mostly because I just want to make sure the shit's done right. I'm getting old, don't have great memory. So try that out. Not only will you find that it quiets things down, you won't get as much binding, those sorts of things, but your torque specs will be more on point. So it's just something I started doing the last few years. It's really helped because I've had to get back in and do certain things on these cars. I'm like, damn, I'm glad I put anti-seize on there. Because if any of you that live in the Northeast, so I'm on the West Coast but I've lived all over. Those of you on the Northeast, this is especially important because you deal with stuck bolts and hardware and stuff all the time. So keep that in mind, make a good practice. It takes literally an extra 30 seconds. I know we're all rushing through stuff, but take your time. You know what I mean? It'll, future you will be happy that current you did that stuff. The car looks good up there right now. Shout out to Colette. I got this shirt at LZ World Tour. All right, boys and girls, everything is reinstalled. Got everything torqued back down. Gonna throw these wheels back on, put the car back on the ground, moment of truth, see if these sounds went away. Real quick, before I get the car back down on the ground, the one thing that I was saying that I am going to do is I'm gonna keep these arms, and I am going to put the GK Tech high misalignment metal bearings in there so that we go away with that rubber bushing altogether, because I know for sure it's a drift car. It's lowered. It's not, stance lowered or slammed, but it's lowered. It's a drift car. The front end gets abused. The suspension gets abused. So I want to make everything as stiff as possible in the front end so that I can not only rid myself of these noises, but also just have the best quality feedback from the vehicle itself. No more pops and bangs. Nice. We got all of these back parked in here, nice, safe and sound. The Z is making no more pops, no more bangs, none of that. Just clean the tires on the truck and go wash it, maybe. Haven't decided yet, we'll see. But yeah, that was the goal in the project for today. If you guys have any questions or you need any help doing this stuff, or you have any questions in general about specifically either one of these platforms or those kind of trucks, right? Follow me on Instagram at Uncle Drift. Shoot me a DM. Happy to help. Later.